Most people believe that by the time of the Korean War, modern logistics had solved the problem of soldier survival. Industrial supply chains, mechanized transport, standardized rations, and advanced medicine are often assumed to have replaced the improvisation and hardship of the Second World War. That assumption is wrong. The Korean War exposed how fragile modern systems still were under pressure, cold, terrain, and miscalculation. Soldiers once again found themselves cold, hungry, undersupplied, and forced to rely on judgment rather than equipment. The reality many veterans quietly acknowledged was that survival in Korea often depended on lessons learned earlier in places like North Africa, Eastern Europe, the Pacific Islands, and the forests of Western Europe. The Second World War had already taught armies what mattered when systems failed. Those lessons were not obsolete. They remain relevant today. What WWII demonstrates more clearly than almost any other conflict is that survival is rarely about having the best gear. It is about understanding environment, conserving energy, managing scarcity, and making decisions that trade short-term comfort for long-term endurance. Energy management really mattered more than, well, just strength or endurance. One of the least discussed realities of surviving the Second World War is honestly exhaustion. Long before anyone actually collapsed, hunger, cold, and stress would just drain a person's judgment. Veterans often noted that the men who didn't make it through weren't always the weakest, but rather those who wasted their energy early on. Experienced soldiers learned to pace themselves, to rest whenever possible, and to avoid unnecessary movement. They realized that keeping their core warmth, staying hydrated, and protecting their sleep were not just about comfort. They were strategic decisions. This insight, carries directly into modern survival situations. Overexertion leads to mistakes. The experience of the Second World War really reinforces that survival favors restraint, planning, and recovery, not just constant action. Social cooperation was a survival tool, not simply a moral ideal. Isolation increased risk, plain and simple. Across every front, soldiers who became part of small, reliable groups fared better than those who tried to tough it out alone. Things like sharing food, dividing up labor, keeping an eye on each other for illness or injury, and making decisions together. All of that helped reduce the strain on any one individual. This was not about sentimentality, it was about efficiency. Groups distributed risk and kept things functioning when individuals faltered. These days, modern preparedness sometimes puts so much emphasis on self-reliance that it can lead to isolation. The Second World War, though, suggests a different kind of balance. Cooperation, honestly, multiplies resilience when systems break down. Psychological discipline was just as critical as physical preparedness. The war exposed how fear, uncertainty, and prolonged stress could really degrade performance. Soldiers who survived learned emotional control, not just suppressing how they felt, but actually regulating it. They limited their exposure to rumors, kept up routines where they could, and focused on immediate, controllable tasks. This kind of mental discipline reduced panic and preserved judgment. Modern psychology would later formalize these observations, but the lessons were learned right there in the field. For today's audience, it really reinforces that survival planning must include psychological readiness. Stress management isn't secondary, it's operational. Many survival failures during the war reshaped post-war doctrine for a reason. Cold weather injuries, disease outbreaks and logistical collapses were all studied intensely after the fighting stopped. Militaries changed their training, equipment design, and supply planning based on what went wrong. These institutional changes remind us that survival knowledge is, well, cumulative. Ignoring historical failures just means having to relearn them the hard way. Preparedness today really benefits from this same kind of humility. The past already paid the cost of so many mistakes. Studying them, honestly, is an advantage. Survival during the Second World War was ultimately about adaptability under constraint. The defining condition of the entire conflict was uncertainty. Plans failed, supplies disappeared, terrain surprised, weather shifted. Survival belonged to those who adjusted without panic and without clinging too tightly to their expectations. That lesson, goes way beyond military history. Whether you're facing a natural disaster, an infrastructure failure, or a long-term disruption, the core principles are the same. Understand your environment, manage your resources like systems, preserve your energy, cooperate intelligently, maintain psychological control, and above all, learn from failure. Remembering these lesser-discussed survival realities really does matter, because history isn't distant, it's instructional. The men and women of the Second World War weren't uniquely resilient. They were adaptive, disciplined, and attentive to reality, and those qualities, honestly, are still just as relevant today. If you value careful historical analysis that connects past experience to modern preparedness, go ahead and subscribe to Warfield Survivor. Share this video with others who believe history is most useful when it's understood deeply and, well, honestly.